The air in the apartment tasted like dust and anxiety. Anya traced the thin, white paper taped to her door, an eviction notice. Past due, $1,950. It was printed in harsh, corporate font, a clinical death sentence for her life in the city. Anya was 27, a walking contradiction, strong shoulders built from years of carrying heavy trays, but a perpetually slumped posture born from the weight of failure. Her studio apartment was less than 5 minutes from the Gilded Cage, the upscale restaurant where she worked, and every morning, the smell of burnt toast and old coffee in her own kitchen was replaced by the cloying scent of imported roses and polished mahogany. The contrast was a daily wound. She slid the notice into her worn leather bag, the one she used for work tips, which currently held exactly $368. Today was Friday. Double shift. She needed a miracle. And she knew miracles didn't happen to waitresses. A quick glance in the mirror, dark brown hair pulled into a severe, work-appropriate bun, a tired but determined set to her jaw. The uniform was starched, the apron immaculate. No one at the Gilded Cage needed to know she was 2 days away from sleeping in her car. They paid her to be invisible, efficient, and smiling. Hi, my beautiful family. I've missed you all. Missed all the experiences we've had together. It's been a rough ride as we're currently battling some technical issues, but trust me, we're getting everything back and running. So stick around, I need your support now more than ever. Thank you for sticking around with me. If you're already hooked in for today's story and ready to enjoy it, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one. And you don't want to miss it. Now let us begin. Before leaving, she paused by her only shelf, picking up a smooth, river-worn stone, a souvenir from a single, beautiful road trip she'd taken with her father before he died. Don't let the weight of the world make you small, kid, he used to say. Today, the world felt immense, and she felt impossibly small. Meanwhile, on the Upper East Side, Julian Hartwell stood in his walk-in closet, staring at his reflection in the perfect pane of glass. 23 years old, impeccably dressed in a custom-tailored suit that felt more like a cage than clothing. He was rich, handsome, and miserable. His life was dictated by schedules, appointments, and the oppressive silence he carried. Julian was profoundly deaf, but he wore his hearing aids with a mechanical grimace. Not because they helped much, they were expensive, state-of-the-art tools for amplifying noise, but useless for processing speech, but because his father, Victor Hartwell, insisted on them. Victor called them the solution. Julian called them the performance. He checked the time. 7:45 p.m. Dinner with Dad and his sycophants. Mandatory. Julian's anxiety manifested as an obsessive need for order. He checked his phone settings, volume off, airplane mode on. He preferred the quiet, the clean visual communication of text. He picked up his keys, heavy and cold in his hand. His father had insisted Julian drive to the restaurant himself, a perverse test of independence. As he drove his silent, electric sedan toward the city center, Julian practiced his lip-reading skills, silently mouthing words he hoped would suffice for the evening. Fine, thank you, no more wine, the steak, medium rare. He didn't participate in conversations. He waited for cues, smiles, or the aggressive hand-waving his father used to command his attention. He pulled up to the Gilded Cage. The valet recognized the car instantly, a black Maybach, unmistakable. Julian stepped out into the humid evening air. The lights of the restaurant felt like an interrogation. He saw the maitre d' nod deferentially to him, but didn't wait. He knew his father's table. Inside, Anya was already busy, navigating the white-gloved battlefield of the dining room. She saw the arrival of the Hartwell party, led by Victor, a massive man whose confidence seemed to consume the air around him. The whispers started immediately. The dragon table, the staff called it. Anya's manager, a slick man named David, cornered her. Hartwell's here. Be swift. Be silent. He hates eye contact, and his friends are savages. And Mary, he lowered his voice, the youngest one? The son? He's the special one. Just avoid him. Avoid him. The instruction was a familiar stab of casual cruelty. Anya took a deep breath, clutching her notepad. She watched as Victor settled, already dismissing the world with a snap of his fingers. Then she saw the son, Julian, standing near the entrance, hesitant. He was far more reserved than his father, his eyes scanning the room, trying to make sense of the noise and the light. She watched him walk slowly toward the table she was about to approach, his posture taut, like a bowstring about to break. Oh, great, Anya thought, the dragon table just got a lot more complicated. Anya is fighting for survival, while Julian is fighting for dignity. What is the most precious thing you've ever had to fight for against a powerful force? Money, an ideal, or something else? Tell us in the comments. Anya approached the table, forcing the practiced, pleasant neutrality onto her face. Victor Hartwell, a man whose charcoal suit seemed to absorb all light, did not look up. He was already deep into a loud, backslapping discussion with his 3 associates, all equally tailored and equally loud. "Good evening, gentlemen," Anya began, her voice low and professional. Victor waved a dismissive hand, not interrupting his own sentence. "Champagne. The 2012 Dom Perignon. And don't spill it." His friends laughed, a sound like tearing silk. Anya swallowed the familiar bitterness and began taking their appetizer orders, which were barked at her with modifications so demanding they seemed designed purely to test her competence. She wrote down every detail, her hands steady despite the tremors beneath her skin. When she reached the end of the table, she finally came face to face with Julian. He had the same cold blue eyes as his father, but in him, they were shadowed by a profound weariness. He hadn't said a word, barely reacting to the noise around him. Anya remembered the manager's instruction to avoid him. She ignored it. She lowered herself slightly, ensuring her face was fully visible under the chandelier light, and spoke slowly and clearly. "And for you, sir? Welcome to the Gilded Cage." Julian looked up, surprised, as if he expected her to simply bypass him. He tilted his head slightly, focusing intensely on her mouth. "The grilled salmon, please," he articulated carefully, his voice slightly higher-pitched, its rhythm flat, the way some deaf people speak when they primarily rely on residual hearing and lip-reading. Anya smiled warmly. It wasn't the fake service smile, it was genuine, a small recognition of his effort. "An excellent choice." "And to drink?" she asked. Julian hesitated, then quickly raised a hand and made a series of quick, elegant movements, a question in American Sign Language. He was asking if the salmon preparation included dairy, a question she realized was probably complicated to articulate purely through lip reading. Anya immediately felt heat creep up her neck. She didn't know ASL. She tried to convey her apology, shaking her head gently. "I'm so sorry, I don't know sign language. Could you please show me on the menu?" Julian's face crumpled slightly, a brief flash of disappointment and frustration. He was reaching for the menu when Victor Hartwell slammed his open palm onto the table. The sound cracked through the general restaurant hum like a gunshot. "Oh, for God's sake," Victor boomed, loud enough to draw stares from 3 nearby tables. "Stop the mime show. Julian, we're dining, not performing." He pointed a thick finger at Anya. "Did you seriously think you could have a conversation with him using your hands, little girl?" Anya felt the blood drain from her face. "Sir, he was just asking a question." "He's deaf, you worthless waitress." Victor leaned back, performing for his cronies, who immediately began to snicker. "Hello? Anyone home? Talk to my deaf son," he yelled, mocking her polite attempt at communication. "Use your voice. Why encourage this hand flapping? It makes me look ridiculous." Julian sank into his seat, his eyes locked on his lap, his face blazing scarlet with shame. The small, private effort he had made, the tiny spark of connection with Anya, had been brutally extinguished and exposed. A cold, heavy rock settled in Anya's stomach. This wasn't just rudeness. This was a father humiliating his child and attacking a stranger for showing basic decency. The memory of the eviction notice, the weight of her job, the fear of homelessness, it all dissolved into pure, white-hot moral rage. She dropped her notepad onto the table, the small thud echoing the silence that had fallen over the nearest patrons. He is asking for clarification about his food, Anya stated, her voice dangerously quiet. It's my job to help him. I was trying to respect the way he communicates. Victor laughed, a short, sharp bark. Respect? You bring me the 2008 Dom Perignon, and you clear the plates. That's your job, sweetheart. Not being a damn life coach. What are you going to do next? Offer him a therapist's couch. You are minimum wage. You are disposable. Don't interfere with my son's development. His development, Anya repeated, her voice rising, shaking. She met Victor's eyes directly, and her eyes, usually soft with exhaustion, were now sharp with defiance. Sir, I didn't see you try to communicate with him once. You just ignored him until he drew attention to himself. You're not trying to fix his hearing, you're trying to erase the parts of him that embarrass your business associates. A gasp rippled across the dining room. Julian finally lifted his head, staring at Anya in astonishment. Victor's face went from contemptuous amusement to a terrifying, congested red. His jaw clenched. You are fired. Get out. Right now. I will have your name blacklisted from every decent establishment in this city before the soup course is done. You have no idea who you're talking to. Anya didn't flinch. She took a step closer, planting her feet on the expensive carpet. I know exactly who I'm talking to, she said, her voice now ringing with conviction. A bully. And a man who just humiliated his own son in front of 60 people because he values image over humanity. She turned from Victor and looked directly at Julian, her face clear and slow. She didn't speak loudly for the room, she spoke distinctly for him. You don't need fixing, she articulated. There is absolutely nothing wrong with you. The entire restaurant erupted, not in laughter, but in murmurs and sudden applause. One older woman stood up, pointing at Victor. How dare you? Victor was momentarily paralyzed, his power stripped by the collective moral judgment of the room. Julian, watching Anya, felt a dam break inside him. The shame was still there, but it was being drowned out by a startling, violent surge of gratitude and defiance. Victor Hartwell was sputtering, incapable of forming a coherent threat. His associates were already shrinking into their seats, embarrassed to be associated with a public spectacle that was rapidly being filmed by several discreet smartphones. I will see you ruined. Victor finally shrieked at Anya, pointing violently toward the exit. Go. Now. Before Anya could be physically removed, Julian pushed his chair back with a scrape of expensive wood on marble. He stood, his gaze fixed on his father, his chest heaving with the first true, defiant anger he'd ever allowed himself. You're right, Dad, Julian articulated, his voice thick with emotion. You did humiliate me, but not because of my deafness, because of your shame. It was a quiet statement, but it landed like a wrecking ball. He gave his father and the table one last disgusted look, then walked swiftly past the manager, David, who was frozen in horror. Julian paused only to look back at Anya. In the middle of the applauding crowd, her face was pale but determined. It was a silent, intense moment of mutual recognition before Julian pushed through the restaurant doors and vanished. David, recovering his composure, grabbed Anya's arm. You absolute idiot. Get your things and leave. We'll call security if. Anya pulled her arm free. Don't bother. My things are my jacket and my tips. She scooped up the small, worn leather pouch from the service station, her meager earnings for the night. The rage was fading, replaced by the chilling reality. She was jobless, publicly fired by the most powerful, petty man in the city, and still facing eviction. The pride of the moment curdled into fear. Retreat. Outside, the late spring air was thick with humidity, promising a storm. Anya found herself stumbling down the sidewalk, the noise of the city washing over her. She resisted the urge to sink onto a nearby bench and sob. She had chosen principle, and the reward was total insecurity. She had fought the dragon, and now she was cast into the wilderness. Why did I do that? The thought was a relentless, self-flagellating echo. I'm broke. I lost the only job I had. My father's stone is going to be in a storage unit next week. She was lonely, exposed, and utterly regretting the cost of her courage. She pulled out her phone, checking her bank balance one last time. Still $368. Not enough. She considered calling a friend, anyone, but her pride flared up, stubborn and isolating. She didn't want pity, she wanted the world to be less awful. She walked aimlessly, putting distance between herself and the gilded cage, allowing the tension to drain away, replaced by the hollow ache of despair. Julian, meanwhile, was driving at a furious clip toward the riverfront, the sound of the engine a dull vibration that he felt more than heard. He was shaking, partly from the adrenaline of his outburst, partly from the sheer, terrifying realization that he was free. He hadn't just stood up to his father, he had abandoned him. He had chosen himself. He pulled over near a desolate pier. He ripped the expensive hearing aids from his ears and hurled them into the dark water. The silence that followed was absolute, the most profound peace he'd experienced in years. The devices that represented his father's constant, toxic efforts to fix him were gone. He pulled out his phone. He saw a dozen missed calls from his father and his PR team. He blocked them all. Then he thought of Anya. The fire in her eyes, the clarity of her articulation, the terrifying, beautiful risk she had taken for him, a total stranger. She hadn't seen his deafness, she had seen his pain. He wanted to go back, to apologize for his father's cruelty, to thank her, to ensure she was safe. But a deeper, darker part of him resisted. His father's voice, whispering since childhood, was always, everyone has a price. She wants something. They always want something. He fought a rising tide of cynical distrust that was a byproduct of his upbringing. Could he trust her? Or was she, like everyone else, waiting for her payday? He didn't know how to trust simple kindness. He pulled up the restaurant's location, intending to drive back, but then he saw the notifications pouring in, social media alerts. Video clips of the confrontation were already circulating. After a moment of heroic confrontation, both Anya and Julian retreat, driven by fear and distrust, respectively. When you've taken a major risk for a cause or a person, how do you handle the immediate aftermath? Do you feel fear, regret, or a cold certainty? Share your thoughts below. Anya had walked for nearly 2 hours, the emotional exhaustion leaving her physically leaden. The promised storm finally broke, not with a gentle rain, but a sudden, violent deluge that soaked her thin uniform instantly. She huddled in the doorway of a closed electronics shop, shivering, her elegant work shoes ruined by the rapidly flowing gutter water. She pulled the eviction notice from her bag, the paper softening and buckling under the humidity. This was it. The moment of moral victory was over, the reality of sleeping rough had arrived. A sleek, silent black car glided to a stop directly in front of the shop. Its window slid down to reveal Julian Hartwell, his expression tense but resolved. He didn't speak. He simply signed, using the basic universal hand shape for "come here." Anya stared. The gesture was clear, commanding. She hesitated, cynicism fighting against desperation. This was the son of the man who had just fired her and threatened her life. Julian tilted his head, his eyes imploring. He knew she couldn't hear, but he mouthed the word, "Please." Anya, chilled to the bone and seeing the integrity in his eyes that she hadn't seen in his father's, abandoned her resistance. She ran through the downpour and slid into the passenger seat. The car's interior was silent, dry, and warm, a sudden, luxurious sanctuary. Julian handed her a pristine, thick white towel from the back seat. "Thank you," Anya whispered, rubbing her arms. Julian shook his head, looking straight ahead as he began to drive. He signed clearly, articulating his lips slowly for her to read, "I owe you. You were brave." "You owe me nothing," Anya replied, her voice raspy. "You stood up to him too. You risked everything." Julian nodded, pulling onto the freeway. "I didn't risk my home." He paused, then signed, "You are viral. The media will look for you. The police. Maybe my father will make trouble. You can't be found tonight." Anya realized the truth of his statement. She was the central figure in a viral media scandal involving one of the city's most powerful men. She was a target. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Somewhere quiet." Julian signed the word safe by crossing his arms over his chest, a gesture Anya instinctively understood. The sanctuary. They drove for another half hour, leaving the glittering high-rises behind for a quiet, tree-lined suburb. Julian pulled into the driveway of a beautiful, understated modern home, all clean lines and glass. "This is one of my father's properties," Julian mouthed as he signed. "It is empty, boys. He hates the suburbs. No one knows I have the key." Anya followed him inside. The house was immaculate but sterile, filled with expensive, impersonal furniture covered in dust sheets. It smelled faintly of cleaning solution and disuse. Julian led her into a pristine guest suite. He quickly found a pair of oversized, comfortable gray sweats and a thick knit sweater from the closet, setting them out for her. "I need to leave now," Anya said, gesturing toward the clothes. "I can't stay here. When the media frenzy dies down, I'll go back to my place." Julian's face hardened, his blue eyes intense. He walked over to a small smart TV on the wall, grabbed the remote, and turned it on. He turned the volume down to 0, and the screen instantly filled with a major national news alert. A split screen showing Victor Hartwell's furious face and a grainy cell phone shot of Anya standing at the dinner table. The news ticker flashed: Billionaire Hartwell's stock drops. Public outrage over treatment of deaf son and waitress. Julian signed, patiently, "You are not leaving. This is not dying down. He threatened you. Stay here until we decide what to do." Anya looked at the television, the full reality of the situation washing over her. She wasn't just fired, she was suddenly a central figure in a massive public drama, and her former boss was a man who owned the city. She looked at Julian, seeing the fear in his own eyes, fear of his father, fear of the world's sudden focus, but also a deep conviction that she belonged under his protection. Reluctantly, she nodded. "But just tonight." Julian smiled faintly, the first genuine, unburdened expression Anya had ever seen on his face. He quickly signed, "There are food and drinks. I will sleep in the main house. We communicate by text." He pulled out his phone and typed, "Rest. You earned it." As Julian walked away, Anya was left alone in the silent, empty opulence. She felt an unsettling mix of gratitude, terror, and a fragile new sense of safety, all tied to the strange, lonely young man who had just saved her. She picked up his borrowed clothes, the soft fleece comforting against her damp, chilled skin. The forced proximity had begun. The next morning broke clear, but the small house felt heavy with unspoken tension. Anya woke late, wearing Julian's two large, comfortable sweats. She found Julian in the sterile, open-plan kitchen, standing over a tablet, watching news coverage of the restaurant scandal. He was utterly silent, reading the captions and comments. He looked up when she entered, quickly turning the tablet off. He signed, "Coffee is hot." He had left a notepad and pen on the counter next to a thermos. Anya poured herself a mug. "The house is beautiful, Julian, but it feels like a museum." Julian picked up the pen and wrote quickly, "It is. My father owns it for tax reasons. No one lives here. It's a financial asset." He looked at the vast, empty space, a visible pang of loneliness crossing his face. "It suits him," Anya said, setting her cup down. "Everything is an asset." She hesitated, then pulled out her wrinkled, water-stained leather bag. She opened it and pulled out the crumpled eviction notice. Julian watched her, his expression unreadable. "This is the real cost of my courage," Anya said, her voice catching. "I don't have anywhere to go. I'm late on rent, and now I have zero income. That's why your father's threat hurt so much. He knew exactly what he was taking." She pushed the notice across the counter. "My story. Not very glamorous." Julian didn't look at the notice right away. Instead, he pulled her worn leather bag closer. He reached in and gently pulled out the river-worn stone Anya's father had given her. It was smooth and gray, stark against the polished granite counter. He stared at the stone, his eyes widening slightly, and then his gaze moved to the gold chain Anya always wore beneath her uniform collar, a small, simple locket. Julian immediately picked up the pen, his hand shaking. He didn't write on the pad. He flipped the pad over and began sketching quickly, intensely. When he finished, he pushed the drawing toward her. It was a detailed drawing of a child's bracelet, featuring small, slightly asymmetrical blue stones that mirrored the color and shape of her locket. Anya looked at the drawing, confused. "What is this?" Julian wrote, "My sister, Isabella. She was deaf too. Born with it. My father loved her." He paused, visibly struggling, then continued, "She died when I was 7. She gave me that bracelet." He pointed to her locket, then back to the drawing. He never talked about her. Anya realized the profound implication of the silence. "Your father? He erased her?" Julian nodded, the movement barely perceptible. He wrote, "After she died, he decided I had to be perfect. She was his failure. I had to be his success. He made me get rid of every sign, every reminder. He stopped using ASL. He made the whole family stop." He threw the pen down. "He didn't hate me for being deaf. He hated me for surviving when she didn't. He hated that I was a reminder of her." A shared wound. Anya felt a fresh wave of grief, not for her own situation, but for the 7-year-old Julian who had been forced to bury his twin grief and his identity for his father's pride. "I'm so sorry, Julian," she whispered. "That's why he reacted so violently. Seeing me try to communicate with you, it brought her back." Julian looked at her, his eyes glistening. He picked up her father's stone. He put it in her hand, then gently wrapped her fingers around it. He signed, slowly, using signs she recognized from the few gestures he'd made before, strong. Anya showed him her locket. "My father died when I was 12. He was my rock. That's why I'm stubborn. I haven't let the world break me yet." She tapped the stone. "He taught me that." Julian took the pen and wrote, his handwriting neater now, more personal, "My father took my rock away. He replaced it with money and silence." He looked at the eviction notice lying nearby. "I hate that he can take yours too." Julian's phone vibrated, a text message notification from an unknown number. He opened it, and his expression changed from vulnerable to tightly contained fury. He quickly typed a reply. "What is it?" Anya asked. He showed her the text exchange. The message was from Victor's lawyer. "Mr. Hartwell is prepared to offer Miss Anya Petrova $10,000 for a signed non-disclosure agreement concerning the events of Friday night. The sum must be collected by end of business Monday. This protects all parties." Anya felt a rush of cold air. $10,000. That's enough to pay the arrears, the fees, and secure a new apartment. Julian looked at her, a profound mixture of hope and fear in his eyes. He didn't write anything. He didn't sign anything. He just waited, letting the offer hang in the quiet, opulent air between them. He was testing her, seeing if she would choose the silence of money, the lesson his father had drilled into him. Anya picked up the pen, drew a large, defiant line through the offer on the screen, and wrote, "The shame isn't worth the price, Julian. I chose dignity once. I'll choose it again." Julian leaned across the counter and signed, "Thank you." It wasn't a thank you for refusing the money, it was a thank you for refusing to confirm his father's cynical worldview. Julian's father taught him that everything, including dignity, has a price. Anya refused the payoff, choosing her moral compass over financial safety. If you were facing eviction, would you take $10,000 from the man who publicly humiliated you, or would you risk the streets to maintain your dignity? Tell us your choice in the comments. The following day became an unexpected lesson in communication. After Anya definitively rejected Victor's offer, a sense of shared purpose settled between them. The external threat was still massive, but the internal wall of distrust, particularly on Julian's side, had finally crumbled. They started with the simple things. Julian, who rarely cooked for himself, showed Anya where the high-end, untouched groceries were. Anya, an expert at maximizing meager provisions, took over the kitchen, transforming the silent, sterile space with the scent of garlic and simmering herbs. That afternoon, Julian approached Anya while she was looking out the large, empty living room window. He held his notepad and a worn, beginner's guide to ASL, which he'd clearly kept hidden among his things for years. He pointed to the book, then to himself, signing the word, "Teach." Anya smiled, a genuine, relaxed smile that Julian realized he hadn't seen enough of. "Okay," she mouthed slowly. But I'm starting at 0. Their first lesson was clumsy, full of laughter and the soft, repetitive sounds of hands meeting air. Julian started with the basics. Anya and Julian. This is me, Julian signed, tapping his chest, then spelling out his name with practiced, swift fingers. Anya tried, her hands stiff and slow. I feel like I'm trying to conduct an orchestra with my fingers. Julian laughed, a low, slightly uneven sound, but purely joyful. He corrected her grip, his fingers brushing hers, sending a surprising current of warmth through Anya. He moved on to simple emotional concepts, his hands moving eloquently, SY, two closed fists shaking, ICHY, hands brushing upward off the chest. Then he signed the word FRND. Anya looked at him, touched by the simple request. She slowly signed it back, palms interlocking, a gentle clasp. Friend, she whispered. The quiet place. As the evening drew in, the atmosphere felt less like a safe house and more like a home. They had moved beyond necessity into shared vulnerability. Why the salmon? Anya asked, resting her chin on her knees as they sat on the floor, surrounded by ASL diagrams and crumpled notes. Julian, leaning against the cold wall, typed on his phone. It was my sister's favorite. She loved fish. I order it every time, hoping my father will remember and say her name. He never does. Anya felt her heart ache for him. He forces you to be his perfect son, but you keep choosing to honor your sister. That's why you're so strong, Julian. You're doing it for Isabella. Julian set his phone down, unable to type. He looked at Anya, then signed, beautifully and clearly, I feel safe with you. Anya signed back, safe, tapping his shoulder lightly. I need to tell you something, Anya spoke, her voice thick. When I was 19, I ran away from the city. I thought I was going to be a photographer. My father had just died, and I needed to escape the memory of that hospital room. She pointed to the river stone she kept beside her. I spent a year living out of a tiny van, driving through the mountains. I had never been so broke or so free. But when the money ran out, I had to come back. And when I came back, the world closed in. I stopped seeing the potential. I just saw the bills. You stopped dreaming, Julian mouthed, understanding. I did, Anya confirmed. I forgot I could be anything but the waitress. Julian moved closer, signing. You are the woman who fought the dragon for a stranger. You are not just a waitress. You are brave. He then signed 2 words she hadn't learned yet, words that transcended the simple grammar of their lessons. He signed them slowly, distinctly, letting the gesture hang in the air. I need you. Anya's eyes welled up. She reached out and placed her hand against his cheek, feeling the soft stubble of his unshaven jaw. The room, which had been silent, was suddenly filled with the roar of 2 lonely hearts finally connecting. Julian leaned into her hand, then closed the remaining distance. He kissed her. It was a gentle, searching kiss. A kiss that was less about passion and more about affirming a mutual, fragile truth. They saw each other completely, without filters, without sound, and without fear. In the sterile, empty house, they were finally full. The fragile peace Julian and Anya had built lasted exactly 2 days. The media storm surrounding Victor Hartwell had peaked, forcing him to issue a sterile, corporate apology, but his personal revenge was just beginning. On Wednesday afternoon, Anya's phone, which she hadn't dared use for calls, displayed a new text message. It wasn't Julian. It was from the lawyer's office, followed by an immediate email attachment. The email was a formal, scathing legal document. It wasn't another NDA offer. It was a cease and desist order combined with a preliminary notice of defamation and harassment, listing Anya as the aggressor. The final, damning document was a court order served by her landlord, stating that due to the public scandal and notoriety associated with her and her actions, her apartment lease was terminated immediately, citing a small-print morals clause. She had 24 hours to vacate. The message accompanying the attachment was chillingly simple. You're out of options, Miss Petrova. Meet me at the Hartwell offices in 1 hour. We will discuss an amended offer, final and non-negotiable. If you involve Julian, the harassment charges become criminal. Victor wasn't just taking her job, He was taking her physical security and threatening her freedom. He had used her vulnerability, her imminent eviction, to corner her. Anya knew she couldn't tell Julian. If she told him, he would confront his father violently, and Victor would use that as leverage for the criminal charges. She had to protect him, and she had to deal with the immediate physical threat of having nowhere to sleep by tomorrow night. The misunderstanding. Anya wrote a brief, vague note for Julian, who was out getting supplies. "I need to go into the city to handle something urgent. Don't worry. I'll be back tonight." It was weak, but all she could manage. She grabbed her bag and Julian's spare keys and left the silent house, hailing a cab for the towering Hartwell headquarters. When Julian returned an hour later, he saw Anya's note on the kitchen counter. He immediately felt a wave of cold dread. She had gone into the city, alone, at the height of the crisis. He frantically checked his phone, seeing dozens of new messages from his father's legal team, all focused on the defamation case against Anya. Then his phone pinged with a notification from a tracking app he had installed on the keys to the guest house. A nervous habit from his father's paranoia. The keys were currently located on the 45th floor of the Hartwell building. Julian stared at the location, his breathing shallow. She went to his office. A few minutes later, Victor himself, the man Julian had been ignoring for days, sent a text to Julian's personal line. It contained a single, grainy, long-distance photo. Anya standing in the reception area of the Hartwell offices. Victor's message was succinct. "She came to us. She has a price, son. They always do. Enjoy your silence." The air rushed out of Julian's lungs. Everything his father had ever preached, that people were transactional, that kindness was a lure, that everyone eventually sold out, slammed into his mind. He saw his father's triumphant smirk in the distance, winning through cynicism. He remembered Anya's refusal of the $10,000, the defiance in her eyes. But why was she there now? Why sneak up? Why in his building? His father was twisting the evidence, and Julian, already wounded by years of emotional manipulation, let the doubt consume him. The breaking point. Anya returned to the house late, exhausted and defeated. She hadn't taken the money, but she had secured a short-term deferment from the landlord's lawyers in exchange for an agreement to issue a joint statement later in the week. She was safe for now, but the emotional cost was immense. She found Julian in the living room, standing rigidly by the window. The house was cold and dark. "Julian, thank God," she started, moving toward him. "I'm so sorry I had to." He cut her off, his hands moving with brutal, mechanical speed, signing the phrase she didn't know yet, a phrase learned from years of watching his father's cruel sign language. "You lied." Anya stopped, her breath hitching. "I didn't lie. I couldn't tell you. Your father threatened." Julian pulled out his phone, holding up the photo Victor had sent. His face was a mask of cold rejection. He typed the words she could read. "The Hartwell building. You went to him. You made a deal." "No. I went to handle the eviction. He used the scandal to terminate my lease," Anya pleaded. "He threatened to make the harassment charge criminal if I involved you. I went to protect you." Julian shook his head violently. He typed out the ultimate betrayal. "You chose money and secrecy. You're a waitress. You needed an apartment. My father said you had a price. I chose to believe you. You chose to prove him right." His words were sharp, piercing her deeper than any threat Victor had made. They weren't just accusations. They were the cynical words of his father, spoken through Julian. Anya felt the fragile bond shatter. Her face crumpled, not with fear, but with the agony of being misunderstood by the one person who had seen her soul. "I risked everything for you, Julian. You choose to believe your father's poison?" Julian, overwhelmed by the fear of being abandoned again, a wound his father had inflicted, turned away, signing the terrible words, "Go away. I trusted you. You cost me my silence." He walked out of the room, slamming the door to the main suite. Anya stood alone in the dark, silent house. She had won the fight against the eviction, but she had lost the one thing that mattered, Julian's belief in her humanity. The isolation was absolute. She questioned if she was ever worthy of connection, if her desperate need for survival was truly a flaw that justified Julian's cynicism. Anya spent the night shivering in the cold, empty guest suite, refusing to enter the main part of the house. The silence was louder than any noise, echoing Julian's crushing words, "You chose to prove him right." In the morning, she gathered her few belongings and the eviction notice. She had protected Julian from criminal threats, but she had failed to protect him from his father's emotional warfare. Julian's accusation hadn't just hurt, it had triggered her deepest fear, that her struggle for basic survival made her inherently transactional and unworthy of love. She had two choices. Avoidance, take the small deferment she had secured from the lawyers, disappear into a cheap motel, and revert to invisibility. This was the safe, lonely path, the path of the worthless waitress. Vulnerability, fight. Not just for her apartment, but for her truth. She had to prove to Julian and to herself that her dignity was not negotiable, even when faced with destitution. She looked down at the river stone in her hand, then at the eviction notice. Her father's voice, "Don't let the weight of the world make you small," resonated in the silence. Victor Hartwell wanted her to crawl away and stay small. Anya found Julian's keys, the spare set he had given her, and a small, worn box containing the $368 she'd earned before being fired. She tucked the key into Julian's worn ASL beginner's book and left it on the kitchen counter, next to a handwritten note. "I didn't take his money. I chose you. You chose him. I can't live in your father's lies anymore." She walked out the door and into the street. She didn't have a plan beyond finding a place to charge her phone, but she chose to face the consequences, rejecting the temptation to disappear. Her choice was simple, truth over pride. Julian's reckoning, breaking the chain. Julian spent the day in a storm of self-hatred. He hadn't slept, sitting rigidly in the silent main suite, staring at his text message to Anya. He had used his father's weapon, cynicism, against the one person who had fought to prove that weapon was useless. He had fallen back into the trap, believing the insidious lie that wealth and power were the only metrics of value, and that Anya's struggle made her easy prey. His fear of abandonment was so acute, he had abandoned her first, using his father's words to push her away. He saw the silence of the house not as peace, but as a vast, suffocating emptiness. When he finally emerged, driven by a gnawing panic that Anya had actually left, he found her note and the ASL book. He read her note again and again, the phrase, "You chose him," hitting him with the force of a physical blow. He realized he hadn't chosen his father, he had chosen his father's poison. Julian sank onto the floor, pulling the worn ASL book onto his lap. His hands trembled as he opened it, flipping to the page they had studied just days ago, the page with the sign for trust. He knew he couldn't just apologize with a text message. He had wounded her with words and silence. He had to redeem himself with visible, undeniable action. He had to stop fighting his father privately and stand up publicly, with Anya, to dismantle the shame that had poisoned his life and his love. He pulled out his phone, bypassing his PR contacts and his father's lawyers. He found the contacts for the local deaf community center and the advocate who had founded it, a woman named Lena. He typed a single message. "I need your help. I need to make a statement about my father, my identity, and the waitress who saved me. I need it loud. And I need her there." He had chosen vulnerability over avoidance. Julian rushed out, driving back toward the city, knowing Anya was probably already gone. He didn't know where she was, but he knew where he had to be, out in the light, fighting for the truth she had risked everything to defend. He was going to find Anya, but first he had to secure the platform she deserved. Julian found Anya exactly where he feared, near her old, locked-up studio apartment, sitting on a worn stoop with her bag beside her. She looked utterly spent, holding her father's river stone like a lifeline. He didn't speak or text. He simply walked toward her and extended his hand, palm up, signing the word trust. Anya looked up, tears blurring her vision. She signed it back, her fingers trembling, then pulled him into a desperate hug. "I didn't take it, Julian. I just wanted to survive." "I know," he mouthed against her hair, holding her tight. "I was terrified. I believed my father's lie because it was familiar. But you showed me that familiar is not always true." He pulled back, his eyes fiercely determined. He showed her his phone. The screen displayed a confirmed event at the City Hall press room in 1 hour, organized by Lena from the Deaf Community Center. "We finish this," Julian signed. "Together." The public reclaiming. City Hall's press room was packed. Julian stood at the podium with Lena, the deaf advocate, beside him. The media was buzzing, expecting him to issue a statement about his father's crumbling company stock and the scandal. Julian did not speak. He had chosen to use his platform, his privilege and his newfound voice, to elevate the truth. He looked out at the flashing cameras and began to sign, fluently and eloquently, while Lena translated his words into spoken English. "My father, Victor Hartwell, is a bully," Julian's hands declared. "He spent my whole life trying to fix me, not because I was broken, but because I reminded him of the deepest parts of himself he chose to discard." He continued, detailing his sister Isabella's life, his father's subsequent silence, and the isolation he had lived with. The room was silent, captivated. "My father called me a performance, and my community a shame," Julian signed. He thought money could buy compliance. He then turned and beckoned Anya forward. She stood beside him, poised and calm, still wearing his borrowed, oversized sweater over her clothes. "The real hero of this story," Julian signed, "is not the billionaire's son. It's Anya Petrova, who chose dignity over destitution. My father tried to crush her because she showed me basic human kindness, and kindness is the one thing he cannot control or buy." He paused, then signed, looking directly at Anya. "He said you had a price, but you have a soul." He pointed at her, then spelled out, slowly and deliberately, "Anya taught me, through her courage, that my deafness is not a weakness. It is an identity. I will now use my resources to fund the Isabella Hartwell Center for Deaf Arts and Advocacy." Anya watched Julian, seeing the man he was always meant to be, strong, compassionate, and beautifully defiant. She was looking at love at last. Resolution, the echo of the spark. 3 months later, the Gilded Cage was known simply as the site of the viral downfall of Victor Hartwell. Victor had resigned, his reputation irreparably damaged, his empire suffering irreversible losses. Anya and Julian stood in a bright, sunny apartment that Julian had insisted they purchase together, a place of their own, far from the toxic properties of his family. It wasn't opulent, but it was filled with light and, crucially, it was theirs. Anya was no longer a waitress. She was working part-time for the Isabella Hartwell Center, helping with grant applications, using the $250,000 the community had raised for her to pay for her education and secure the new life she deserved. Julian was thriving. He was actively learning ASL, surrounding himself with the community he had been denied, and communicating more freely and happily than ever before. Anya placed her hands on Julian's face, making sure he could see her perfectly. "I was thinking," she mouthed. "What do you want for dinner?" Julian smiled, reaching out to gently touch her hands. He signed the word "Isan," but then he signed the word again, differently, slowing his hands to show her the correct, elegant ASL sign for the fish. It was an echo of their first, awkward moment in the restaurant, Act 2, but this time, the sign was perfect, and the meaning was no longer about a question of ingredients, but a shared memory of Isabella and a triumphant symbol of their connection. Anya signed back, LOV, clear and strong. Julian pulled her close. They had found not just love, but a partnership built on integrity, silence, and the knowledge that sometimes, the only thing you need to survive is one person who sees you completely. Anya and Julian found unexpected love by choosing truth and vulnerability over fear and financial security. What great love story have you witnessed or experienced that was forged in a moment of conflict or crisis? What did you choose to sacrifice for that love? Share your story of resilience and connection in the comments below.
Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.